course.
Yeah, exactly, man. Hey, well, first of all, hey everybody,
We're live.
We're live. We're doing the
Debate
night again.
Let's go.
Your favorite Hamadi brothers. That's unfair to say. You know, Brian would be their favorite, but he just can't be here.
Yeah, if he was here, everyone would be so charmed by him. Like, there's just no contest.
100%. Hold on, let me go live on Instagram here.
You know, he's so charming. Like, he would tell these stories about interrogating people, you know, because he's law enforcement. You have to interrogate people, of course, with the lawyer present if they want.
Yep.
And he would get them to like admit to all sorts of stuff. I'm like, how are you doing this? You know, it's like, well, you just talk to them and treat them with respect, and before you know it, they just say everything they want to say. You know?
Confessing everything you want to hear.
Yeah, I was like, man, this guy is so charming. Like,
yeah.
There's no way anyone would confess anything to me. They'd be like, what? No. I want a lawyer right now. They're like, no, this guy seems fine. I'll tell him. He's okay.
Oh my god! You know, dude. Speaking of, I think I need a lawyer, right? Lo and I were watching. You know, like that's her favorite thing to do is crime shows, right? And
Oh yeah.
We're watching some show the other night, and this guy is so caught, right? I mean, he's so caught that when they get him in the room, you know, the detective is like, you know, very mild mannered. Oh, okay, we just want to talk through, you know, what we have here.
Clear up a few of the details that were still
right, and he's just very like just chill, very mild mannered guy. So we have this, and there's this, and of course this, and then this, and so we just kind of wanted to get your take on it, and you know, maybe you could clear up some of these missing pieces, right? And the guy's like, I think maybe I should talk to a lawyer. And the detective goes, sounds good.
Sounds good, yeah.
Like he's just out, you know, like that's it.
You probably should, you know.
Yes,
that's
you're
a
screwed,
good idea.
bro. You're screwed.
I'm not even mad. Like that's what I thought you would say.
Yep. Okay, so we do have VP Vice President Bingo here.
Oh, okay.
So,
I haven't seen this one.
Yeah. So let me get this up here in the Facebook.
So I have to say, I have no idea what to expect here. I mean, I've seen Harris debate plenty of times before, seen Trump, of course, debate many times, but I have just never seen really or heard Walz or Vance in a long form anything really. Like, haven't heard them on podcasts. Haven't heard them on interviews. So I'm coming to it like a
newborn babe.
Yeah, well, what do they call it? Like the low information voters, you know?
Right.
I have no idea what they're gonna say or how they even talk or what their voice sounds like. So we'll see if they can charm me into a confession. Confession.
Yeah. No. It's joy, bud. Joy.
Yeah.
You've missed the memo here.
Oh.
Definitely.
Which candidate is the joy candidate again?
I think it's Walz.
Walz is the joy candidate.
Yeah, I think so.
He's the one that smiles. He looks like a garden gnome or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's the garden gnome guy. Yep.
Gotcha.
That is right. The garden gnome dude. We got Dan Jan joining us from the road here. What's up, Danny?
Darkness.
What's up, boys?
What is happening?
Hey, Nebby.
Hello. I'm drinking some Free Birds.
Sounds nice.
She's ready, man. She is geared up for some vice presidential action tonight.
Which I will be cleaning.
So this is our official bingo card. You guys can go to Axios and grab it if you want.
Okay,
it looks like the hot topics tonight are going to be, we got hiding from media, tariffs, childless cat ladies, OPE, abortion, golden rule. We got a bunch of stuff here. You know, something for everybody. So
let me pull up my version of it, see what we got. Okay, debate bingo. Appalachia mispronounced. How are you supposed to pronounce it? I actually don't know this.
I think it is Appalachia.
Is it Appalachia or Appalachia?
Oh, Appalachia?
Like I honestly don't know. I'm not trying to be silly.
I thought it was Appalachia.
Appalachia.
Live in the Appalachians.
Minnesota Miracle? I don't know what that is. Hillbilly Elegy. I mean, I did see the movie. I thought it was pretty good. Ivy League, Immigrants, Golden Rule. Weird. Weird. The question is, who says weird? Like that should really be on there. Waltz's military record. I bet he doesn't talk it up. Because I think it's now officially old news, right? Is it kind of baked in? Everyone knows.
Oh boy.
Yep.
Wait.
Ed, give us your last thoughts as we watch here as JD
It's on CBS. Who's the moderators? Anyone important?
It's performance,
Just randos?
performance. That seems
Anyone important? Nah, nobody important, dude.
Just random people?
Yeah, I think the Bob Schaefers of this world are gone, dude. Peter Jennings, they're all toast.
Okay, so it's basically just actors that news readers. Is it going to be news
I think that's what
readers?
it is. I think they're performance actors, crisis actors, things like that. Yeah.
The vice presidential debate coming up in a moment.
Okay, I actually recognize some of these guys.
Oh,
they
Nora
have a
O'Donnell.
little
Ohio
panel.
Senator JD Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim
And this is
Walz
like more
take the
action
stage.
than
They've taken the
there
stage.
was for
So
the
stick with
presidential
us here
debate.
and join us also on our streaming channel, CBS News 24/7 for exclusive content. you won't
Hey, I
see
can't hear that. Well, can you turn it up a little
anywhere
bit, or are you keeping it low
for joining
while we're
us.
in pre-show?
Yeah, I was keeping it low. Well, they may have a commercial break, or maybe straight to it. Let's hear the theme music, guys.
Da-da-da-da.
Can you hear that better?
Da-da-da-da.
Is that nice and loud for you?
I mean, there's a little bit.
I like it.
Oh man, listen, I'm getting fired up, guys.
News is happening.
Yes, news is happening.
Tonight, with just over a month to go until Election Day, the first and only meeting between the two men who hope to become Vice President of the United States. Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio.
Now, this is likely the final debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states. CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate starts now.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take this country back.
And we are ready to continue to build the future together.
We're going to turn this whole country red.
Let's
with
go.
President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
We're getting a lot. The videos are really jumpy.
Live from
Is it?
CBS News
Yeah, it's
headquarters
bouncing
in
a lot.
New York. America decides the vice presidential debate.
See if I can do something about that.
Good evening. I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining
Streaming
us for
live on
tonight's
Max.
CBS News Vice Presidential
Is
Debate.
it?
We
Yeah.
want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance tonight meeting for the first time.
Yes. Nod.
In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to.
You're like yelling
Is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you.
Put it
Just
all the way
is
up.
that all right? It was
Yeah,
good.
It looks good. It
Is
looks good.
facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. Now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet in Israel. That attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, But the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you are the final voice in this situation,
You got to check, make sure none of these guys have those earring microphones.
By Israel on Iran. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back,
a little nervous. It's okay.
Ending the humanitarian crisis in
He's doing fine so far.
Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies
looks a little terrified.
Is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States.
Is this national television?
You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere.
Not even a
near
reach
the
around.
White House.
There was even a
Closest
ramp
to
up.
them,
That was just like straight
to the Donald Trump.
He's
said
garbage.
he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable.
Smart framing right out of the gate.
Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put
Nuclear
something else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership.
Is he doing the
And
George
when
Bush thing
Iran
on purpose?
shot down an American aircraft in international
Maybe it's another
airspace,
He is a folksy
Donald
guy.
Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries,
Seegers says
wrote it off as headaches.
Vance's
Look, our
eyeliner's
allies
on point.
understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said...
Always weird to me how the vice presidential candidates seem like they're more together than the presidential candidates. Like every time. It's like, let's put the clowns at the top and then...
Did he make a mistake? You have
These are
one
the people
minute.
that didn't
Well,
have to
first of
go
all,
through
Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word,
Right.
but I
Primary
think
weeds
that's
out
something
the
that
good
Governor
people.
Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Gentlemen.
Thank you.
And I use
Let's
that
turn
term
now to
loosely.
Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need the government to do their job. And I
there you go.
That when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first.
Tubbs actually got credit for that one first.
You asked about climate change.
Said
I think this is a very important issue.
Appalachia.
A lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But
just not for everyone.
Some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about.
Oh, and Emily, congratulations. Although I'm a little upset that I wasn't invited.
Drives all of the climate change.
Me too.
Well, let's just
but
say
we love you.
True. Just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe
nice
that,
pull on the weird word.
The answer is that you want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible.
On the board.
And you want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? more energy production in China,
You
more
notice how he's framed
manufacturing
this as
overseas,
Harris's policies?
more doing business in some of the
think
dirtiest parts of the
there's
entire
a,
world. And when I say that, I mean
advantage to saying
the amount
we're
of
not
carbon
the
emissions
incumbent,
they're doing
right?
per
Because
unit of
the
economic
number of,
output. So if we actually care
percentage
about
of
getting
people that say
cleaner
we're on
air and
track,
cleaner water, the
so it's
best
like,
thing to do is
we're
to
not the
double
we're the
down
change
and
candidate.
invest
You're
in
the
American
incumbent.
workers
So it's like
and the
over and
American
over and
people.
over and over again.
Unfortunately,
You're the
Kamala
incumbent.
Harris has done
Harris
exactly the
administration.
opposite.
Harris.
Governor Walz, you have
Yep.
2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together to solve the governors and the emergency responders on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investment.
You fell for it.
Global history that
What?
we've seen in.
He said Harrison. He said what we've seen in the Harris administration
across
is.
the country, 2000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking.
That's when you know you got a powerful frame right there.
Yeah,
200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts.
You know, Waltz comes across as very likable.
But what they're doing is
like,
adapting.
Oh, totally, dude. Every time he's on
friendly.
camera.
Look, I harvest corn, I harvest
think
soybean, and I harvest wheat.
Vance comes
We're
across as like
producing
more
natural
laser
gas and
focused,
more
like
oil
more
at any time
intense.
than we ever have. We're also producing
like I don't know that I
more
would want to
clean energy.
negotiate against
So
him.
the solution for us is to
Waltz
continue to
comes
move
across like
forward.
very
That
friendly,
climate change
like-
is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely
likable.
critical.
I think it's
But this is
an
not your
advantage
false
in this
choice.
case of
You can do
age.
that at
You
the
know,
same time you're creating the
he's
jobs
more
that
comfortable in his own
across
skin.
the country.
Totally.
That's exactly what this
Avuncular.
administration has done.
Nothing to
We are
nothing to
seeing us
prove really.
becoming an energy
Vance looks like
superpower
he
for
might
the
yell at
future,
you for
not just the
your
current.
low
And that's
grades
what
in math or
absolutely
something.
makes
Yeah, he's a
sense.
little
And then
intense.
we start thinking about
Yeah, but what a
how we
difference, though. I mean, what a
mitigate
difference
these
between the presidential
disasters.
debate as far as just
Thank
the
you. Senator,
form
I
and
want to
function
give you
of
an
how they're
opportunity
dealing with
to
each other.
respond
You
there.
know?
The governor mentioned
Oh, yeah.
that President
Yeah, these
Trump
guys
has
are way
called
better. I
climate
think
change
they
a
should be at
hoax.
the top of
Do
the
you agree?
ticket. We should just swap.
Well, look, what the president has said
Swap
is
them
that
out, right?
the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her
Would you
leadership,
change
if
your
they
vote, though,
really
Russ?
believe that climate change is serious.
If
Well, I
Vance
don't know.
was
I'm
the
still, I
guy
haven't heard
and
much from
Trump
Waltz.
was,
and more
I'm
energy
new.
Was that-
production in the United States.
I don't know
of
anything
America,
about
and
Waltz.
that's
I'm
not what
listening.
they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't.
Yeah, Dan, be quiet. Let him listen.
If she should, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Waltz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse
your
by the
time
climate.
is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting
Mitigation. Nice word. Why isn't that on my bingo card?
I
feel like it should be.
things that we're seeing
Yeah.
more and more of. But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at
No compliment for finishing on time. That was
Thank you.
Oh, did
beautiful.
you see that?
We're going to
There
turn
was a
now
fact check.
to
So we're not going to
immigration.
fact
The
check, but
crisis
they
at
just
the
did. See
U.S.-Mexico
that?
border consistently ranks as one of the
At least they
top
fact checked the other guy for
for
once.
American voters.
No, they
Senator
fact checked Vance.
Oh, they
Your
did.
campaign is pledging to carry
Like
out
just for the record, the
largest
majority
mass
of
deportation plan in
scientists
American
say that the
history
Earth is
and to
warming.
use the
Okay,
U.S.
now we'll move on.
military to
Right, we
do
got it.
so. Could you be more specific?
They just
about
can't help
exactly
themselves,
how
man.
this will
It's
work?
crazy.
They're
For
convinced they're the
example,
smartest
would you
people.
deport parents who have entered the U.S.
people that
illegally
read a
and
teleprompter for a
separate
living.
them from
Yeah,
any of their
congratulations.
children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop. the
First of
bleeding.
all,
we have
Margaret.
a historic immigration crisis
Immigration.
because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations.
We got immigrants on that one, right?
Illegal aliens.
Yeah.
Massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall.
Wish they had stopped the bleeding on here.
And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what
I'd have
we
a bingo
actually do.
already.
So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American
Gosh,
workers.
I don't have deportations
A lot
on
of
here
people
either.
will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation.
Did you guys see the
policy in this
stats on
country
that were just
unfortunately
released like this
Kamala
week?
Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow
Insanity.
Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this.
I didn't see the
Real
stats.
leadership would be saying, you know what, I
Dude,
screwed up.
apparently
We're gonna go back
some
to Donald Trump's border
congressman
policies. I
asked
wish
for
she
a
would do that. It would be
Freedom
good
of
for all
Information
us.
Act or something. They
Governor,
released these numbers are
do you care to
nuts.
respond to any of those specific
Well, it turns out that the
allegations,
biggest human
including that the
trafficker
vice
in the United
president
States
is,
is the
quote,
United States
letting
government?
in fentanyl and
Wow.
using kids as drug mules, among other things
Yeah,
regarding
well,
children?
the drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on
Springfield,
immigration.
Ohio.
Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state, a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and
one of
drug
her talking
interventions.
points. I
But
don't think
look,
that-
we all want to solve this. Most of us.
I just
want
heard
to solve this.
prosecuting trans
And
next to
that
each
is
other,
the
and I was like, wait, what?
That's the Border Patrol agents.
What?
That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new
not
border
this
agents.
Border bill
Protection
again.
for
That has
drugs.
been debunked so many
DOJ
times.
money
Like,
to speed
how?
up these
I don't get it.
the adjudications on this, just what America wants.
Well,
But as soon
what
as
has
those
not
things
been
get
debunked
passed
is
and actually
that
come to this,
they
Donald
had it
Trump
ready to
said no.
pass, and Trump
Told
said
them to
no.
vote
I mean, that's a
against it
fact.
because
Well,
it gives
That's
them
not
a campaign issue.
debunkable. That's
yeah,
a
What
fact.
Donald Trump
The
talk
people
about if
who
we
were
actually did some
who were
of these
actually
things. And they
negotiating it
need
said
to be
that it
done
wasn't
by the
close to being
legislature.
done.
You
Like,
can't
they
just
were-
do this
It
through the
wasn't like,
executive
oh, we're
branch.
we're
So
done.
look, we have the
It just
options
got
to do this.
sabotaged
Donald
at the
Trump
end.
had
There was a
4
lot of
years.
people that
He had
wanted
4
that
years to
didn't
do
like
this,
it
and he
for
promised
a lot
you,
of
America,
reasons,
how easy
including
it
that
would
it
be. I'll build you a
regularized
big,
a lot of
beautiful wall,
illegal border
and Mexico
crossing.
will pay for it. Less than
and that
2%
Trump
of that
saying
wall
that
got
gave them
built,
enough
and Mexico
cover
didn't pay a dime.
politically
But
to
here
be
we
able
are
to vote it
again,
down the way
9
they
years
wanted
after
to.
he came down that
So
escalator.
the idea that's like everybody
dehumanizing
was on board,
people
Trump killed
and
it. It's
telling
like
him what he
that's
was going
just
to do.
it's
As
not
far as the
true. It's
deportation
false.
plan, at one point, Senator Vance
We'll have to
said
agree
it
to
was so
disagree on that
unbelievably
one.
laughable.
Okay.
So that's where we're at. Pass the bill. She'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator,
Boom,
the
right on
question
time.
was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Yes. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our border czar, Kamala Harris, has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed, you've got hospitals,
and they're eating dogs and cats.
Eat the dogs.
Eating them.
Brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans.
Why is that not on this list? Or is it on yours?
The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this
that's
issue
an interesting bit of
continuing to bring
triangulation
this
on
up,
the part of Vance.
of not
Like,
dealing
look,
with it,
I think you want to
blaming
fix the
migrants
border.
for
I'm with
everything.
you.
It was
I
good.
don't think Harris
Good,
does.
right?
Talk a
That
little
was
bit
great.
about Wall Street speculators
that was
buying
very
up houses
clever.
and making them less affordable. But it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about to the least of these as you do unto me.
That's
I think
nice.
that's true of most Americans. They simply
These Democrats, man, they're using the Bible verses. They're waving the flag. It's almost like they're pretending to be Americans or something.
keep our dignity.
Unbelievable.
Other people.
He should have shut up with a red tie.
Just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does
That
have
would have been
a
funny.
large number of Haitian migrants
Here we go.
who have legal status, temporary protected.
Fact check.
Well,
Fact check.
Laura,
But
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
No,
We're
no,
gonna-
see,
Yeah.
no, we're not going to respond to a fact check. No, we get the last word. Fact check.
You guys are going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP-1.
How did you just do that?
where you go on as an
Because
illegal migrant,
they're
apply for
violating their
asylum
own
or
rules
apply
by
for parole,
fact checking
and
after
be
they both
granted
agreed there would be no
legal
fact checks on
status
either side.
the wave
Okay, if
of
you're going to fact check me, then
Kamala
I got
Harris.
You're going to fact check me. Here we go. You're violating
It's
the
not
rules.
a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank
our
you,
own
Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process.
Kamala-
We
and
have
Kamala
so much
Harris
to get
opened up
to,
that
Senator.
pathway.
Those
We have
laws
so
have been on
much-
the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
We
CBP
want to have.
app has not been on the books.
What happened to muting the mics?
They just
Gentlemen,
muted him.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the
Both
legal
y'all shut up.
process.
We're in charge.
Nora.
Thank you, Margaret.
The childless
The
cat ladies were in
economy
charge.
is a top concern for
Oh, my
voters.
goodness.
Each of your
I'm
campaigns
speaking.
has released an economic plan. So let's
I'm
talk
speaking.
about the
I'm
specifics.
speaking.
Governor
How did
Walz,
they
Vice
get
President
muted
Harris
and
unveiled a
Kamala
plan
and
that includes
freaking
billions
Trump
in
didn't get
tax
muted
credits
at all?
for manufacturing,
I know.
That
housing,
is
and a renewed
surprising.
child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's
That should be a free
deficit
space.
by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So
Middle class family, baby.
Yes, middle class family.
Middle
Middle
class
class
family.
That's what this is supposed to
Have you seen a
happen.
picture of her
You should
middle
be
class
listening
family
how
home?
this is going to impact me.
That she
No,
grew up
I'm
in?
just
Forward
upset that
plan
middle
that
class
Kamala
isn't on my
Harris
bingo
put
card
out
either.
there is
It's
one is
huge. It's
talking
like
about this housing
7,000
issue.
square
The
feet.
one
This
thing is,
mansion.
there's 3
Middle class
million
family
houses
home.
proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end.
I'd like to upgrade to that. Maybe I could be in the middle class someday.
Yeah, sure.
To be
Yeah.
traded somewhere.
Well, hey,
It's
middle class
foundational to
from
where you're
when
at.
she was born,
And
maybe
then
it
making
was.
sure that the things you buy every day, whether they
Middle
be
class now
prescription
is a
drugs or
cargo
other
van.
things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the
Oh, dude, I'm
Down by
looking
the
at one of
river.
her homes right now, and it is
but
not.
it costs $5
It is
to
not.
make insulin.
Not middle
They
class.
were charging
It's
$800
pretty bad,
before
actually.
this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the
Russell.
long run, and we do
Yeah.
the right
This is
thing for
apparently
families.
home from
And then
age
getting
3 to
businesses off
12.
the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical
adorable.
difference between us. Donald Trump
That looks
made
middle
a promise,
class.
and I'll give you this. He kept it.
We'll go
He
with it.
took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever.
Hey,
now he's
does
proposing
anyone know
a
what his
20%
popularity
consumption or
is in
sales
his state?
tax
Is he a
on
pretty
everything we
popular
bring
governor?
in. Everyone agrees, including businesses.
He was just reelected with, I think, 57%.
Inflation and potentially
Okay.
lead to a recession. Look, this
So
is simple for
reasonably
you.
popular.
Where are we going?
Yep.
Kamala
Good.
Harris has said to do
That's
the
why
things she
the
wants to do.
Minnesota
We just
Miracle
have
is on the
wealthiest to pay their fair share.
bingo card
when
here.
We do that. Our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan
Oh,
and says it would
fact-checking.
increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans.
I think,
Kamala Harris
honestly,
has great plans
that
for how to
is
address
Trump Vance's best attack line, period, is
Why haven't you done it?
affordability. Well, no, it's affordability. It's not about inflation or wages, it's affordability. You can't afford the same things that you used to be able to afford.
Not just a plan, but
that's it.
Whatever you want to call that.
A lot of those
the numbers, whatever, you just can't afford
Trump's plans, and they
Right.
have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers.
True.
Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying
He's
the
got
bills.
that speak into the camera and say you.
Brings back
He's got it
common sense
down.
to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle
Yeah,
class?
well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he
barely
does.
popular.
My pro tip of the day is
from,
this. If you need heart
Madame
surgery,
Tubbs.
listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years? And the last year as president.
Great point.
That's what's wrong with the system.
Don't hate the player,
There's
hate
a
the
way
game.
around it. And he's bragged about that.
That's what.
Yeah,
That's what he said, right?
That is what he
It's
says.
like, hey, I just I got the rules
Governor,
there. I
you
take
say
advantage of
trust
the rules.
experts.
They put them
But
in
those
place.
same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom.
I actually haven't heard much
Senator
Kennedy bait
Governor Walz, can you
from him
address
yet.
that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
If you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over.
Can we put aside that? Are they going to ever bring up the fact that Vance was against Trump forever?
Venture
You think he
capital
brings
in
that
some
up
cases,
or
putting
no?
money into companies that were overseas.
He should.
Agreement that we bring those
Didn't
home.
he
The
already
issue is
mention
Donald
it?
Trump is
He
talking
mentioned
about
his
it.
opening
Kamala
statement.
Harris has a record.
I don't think so.
250,000 more
Yeah, he said
manufacturing
even
jobs
Vance,
just
even
in out of
Senator
the
Vance
IRA.
said,
May I respond to
it
that?
quoted
Yes.
the tweet.
So appreciate that. So if you notice what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the
No, that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on. And
that's a small town right there.
I joined the National Guard at 17.
And Waltz's military record. That's a twofer.
GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there,
I can't be held responsible for the things I say when I get swept up in my own rhetoric.
I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor,
is
just
that Walz
referencing
the classroom?
The question was, can you explain
right?
the
Talking
discrepancy?
about
All
teaching?
I said on this was I got there that summer.
Did he?
And misspoke on this, so I was
Since
just
I was,
okay.
you know,
that's what I've said.
teacher.
So I was in
Take that with
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in, and from that I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest
There you go,
office,
Dan.
And you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear. You have 2 minutes.
Fair question.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open.
By the way,
And
boys, we
sometimes,
have
of course, I disagree
a
with the
special
president,
guest.
but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the
Horahan.
that turned out to be
What's up, Jamie?
fabrications
What's
of
up,
his
boss?
record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example.
We'd all
I
be
think that we
surprised
could
to
have done
learn
so
that.
much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular.
Emily
Margaret,
asks if the
because,
reference to
you know, to
2020,
just accuse this
if
of
we can
being
count
a
that for
national
2020
sales
election.
tax. Look,
I don't know.
One thing,
Oh,
and,
that's
you know,
that's
you're
a
probably surprised
borderline.
to
What do
hear me
you call it,
praising Joe
Russ?
Biden, but
Well,
the one thing
I
that
think
Joe
as a
Biden
wedding
did
gift.
is he continued to
Oh,
say tariffs that protected
okay.
American
Well, that's a wedding gift for
manufacturing
everybody
jobs.
then.
And it's
Yep.
the
Thanks,
one
Em.
issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration. It's the one issue where Kamala
I mean,
Harris
we all
has
owe a
run
debt to
away
love,
from Joe
right?
Biden's record.
That's right, man.
Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights.
Your time
Charles,
is
after
up.
Roe versus Wade
Border
was
Cien.
overturned, you signed a bill into
Here we go.
law
We're going to get
that made
abortion
Minnesota
and
one of the
IVF
least
right here.
restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion.
Abortion.
Former
Click.
President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific.
Yikes.
Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have
Project
a registry
2025.
of
25.
pregnancies.
Da-da-da.
It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible,
I'm
to
one
get
away from a
contraception
bingo here. It's
and
for
limit
OPE,
access,
and I
if
don't
not
even know what that
eliminate
is.
access to infertility treatments. For
Oh.
so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business. But those
Yeah,
things
I'm
are
one away
being
on
proposed.
hillbilly
And the
elegy
catch-all
and
on this
IVF.
Is, well,
I-
the states will decide.
we could get it right
what's
here.
Right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No,
No.
certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans
That's a
care about
dumb
it. I know
question.
A lot of Americans don't agree.
Sorry,
with
Nora.
everything
Love
that
you.
I've ever said on this topic. And, You know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had
Certainly we
pregnancies
won't.
and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do.
Well, you're right about that. They do not.
To be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same.
Whatever.
Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right.
Doesn't have the same
I agree with
branding.
a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does
It's
not.
annoying
and
that's
the
just
problem.
wrong.
Governor, your time's up. Senator
He's
Lynn,
already
let me ask you
admitted he's
about
not
that.
precise
You
when he's
mentioned
using
he was
rhetoric.
referring to a
That's right.
national
He gets
ban.
just so
In the
carried
past,
away,
you
you
have
know.
supported
Yeah.
a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be.
This is a winner for the Democrats, man.
Sure
this has been forever.
It's more popular right now.
One of the lowest teen pregnancy rates.
What were you saying, Dan?
Too. We know that the options.
I'm just agreeing with you.
And we make that
I
true.
just think it's
We
so much
also
more
make it
powerful. Although I have to, I'm
top 3
not a
states
JD Vance
for the
fan
best
at
place to
all,
raise children.
but I'm
these
very
two things to
impressed
try
by the
and
way
say
he's debating right
that
now.
We're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion.
I think he's
That's
done a
not the
very
case at
good
all.
job in the way he
We're
responds
pro-freedoms
and
for women
in
to
his
make their choices,
overall
and we're
demeanor
going, and Kamala Harris
and the way he's saying things.
making
It's like
the
I've
case
heard some of the
to
other
make
stuff he
options
said,
for
and
children
he's
more
toned down
affordable,
his
a
rhetoric so
$6,000
much.
child tax
Like
credit.
I'm saying
But
it
we're
again,
not
he's
gonna
gotten
base that on
coached
the backs of making
very,
someone
very
like
well, and
Amber
he's taken
Thurman
that coaching very,
drive
very well
600
for this
miles
debate.
to try and get health care.
Senator.
You're talking about
that. First of
Vance?
all, Governor, I agree with
Yeah.
you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the
pro-abortion,
law is.
that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force
Fact
Catholic
check.
hospitals to perform abortions against their will?
What'd you see?
Kamala Harris has supported
It
suing
is.
Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always
Please.
something there. This is a very.
Did you guys
simple
get something on the
proposition.
bingo card there?
These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong
This
about,
was-
Governor? Please tell me. What was I wrong
That is
about?
not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
What are we missing on this bingo card here? I've got weird, immigrants, abortion, Appalachia, mispronounced, childless cat ladies. Did they do childless cat ladies?
They did not.
They didn't.
not.
You
Nevi's trying to convince me of that. Small town,
no
Springfield,
cheating, Nevi.
Ohio, and Waltz's military record. Is there anything else I'm missing?
I think you got the same things I do. I'm missing golden rule tariffs, Harris flip-flops, radical liberal, looking strongly, Ivy League, hillbilly elegy, IVF, hiding from media, childless cat ladies, coach,
Yeah,
and
coach.
the summer 2020 protests.
So
and I found out what OPE is. OPE is like some kind of Midwestern, like
Is
interjection.
it OPE or OPE?
OPE. So like OPE.
like what does that mean? Like oh snap?
Yeah, I had to look it up.
Now I did.
OPE, sorry.
Oh, okay.
OPE.
So
OPE, sorry. OPE.
So this last topic that they're talking about, the Born Alive thing, I put the. It looks like it went to the YouTube channel instead of. Let's see here. Instead of Facebook, I'm like, let me get it on the Facebook page too, because I'd be very curious to hear what people say after they read this through the language of the bill, right? So the idea is, they keep saying, oh, nobody wants a partial birth abortion or nobody's killing already born babies, right? Which I believed that until I, read this kind of thing. So the deal is they have this law that basically, here, I'm putting it on I just put it on Facebook. You guys can, that's the direct link to the statute. But basically what they did is they relaxed the requirements for two things. One, for doctors to provide. So let's say you have this late term abortion. It doesn't have to be even in the 9th month. It could be maybe the 8th month, 7th month, whatever. But
post viability.
Correct. Post viability. They attempt an abortion. The abortion is not successful. The baby is born alive. Right. According to, and again, read it and look. You guys call me out if I'm misinterpreting this. But the way it reads to me is there's room there for the doctor basically to not do everything they can to save that baby's life, and because they were reporting too many of these incidents, they also got rid of the requirement to even report that the incident had taken place at all. And so it's
now we don't even know when it happens.
It's I don't know. It makes me very uncomfortable knowing that this kind of thing is out there. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, and I've heard people try to argue it. I'm sure there's very fine people on both sides of this argument, but it is it's very uncomfortable if you just kind of read through the language, to me anyway. So well, I'd be curious anybody else's thoughts on it.
Just to follow your description of the change in the law in 1976, Minnesota had a law that said in it that a live child born as a result of an abortion shall be fully recognized as a human person, accorded immediate protection under the law. So it's like if a child is born alive, we have responsibilities to them. They're a human person. If we ignore them or fail to provide medical care, that is a crime, and so on. And then later on, they had to also add these reporting requirements. So that law in 2015.
We're coming back here.
Hey, Eric, real quick, what's the page and line of the statute that you sent that we should be reviewing?
I don't know because I haven't pulled this up in a little bit, but I'll find it and I'll send it.
There's a quick. I just send a message to Eric if he wants to post it to the thing a little.
Okay.
Gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is just your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the San Diego parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter.
Jeez.
I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota,
We understand the Second Amendment is there.
enhanced red
It
flag
exists.
Yeah,
laws, enhanced
it is there.
background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and I here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership
That's
rate in
because
the
they are
country.
finished.
There are reasonable things that we can
Finish
do
him.
to make a difference.
Finish him.
It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of
But we
you
are.
out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix.
It's a little
These are things that
disingenuous,
shouldn't
man.
be that
I
difficult.
mean,
You can still keep your
we
firearms.
want you
and
to
we
keep
can
all
make
your
a difference.
firearms, and
We
yet we're
have.
going to get
If you're listening
gun
tonight,
violence down to
this breaks
Finland
your heart.
levels.
No, they're gonna.
Where you're not allowed to have a
Tim,
gun.
Your 17-year-old.
Yeah, I don't understand what he's saying.
I'm sorry about that, and I
I
hope that he's
appreciate
doing
you
okay.
saying so.
Christ have mercy. It is awful.
That was a
And
really
I appreciate
good
what-
moment.
What Tim said actually about Finland, because I do
I
think it
disagree.
illustrates some of the frankly weird
You disagree?
differences between our
I
own
didn't
country's
like
gun
the
violence
Christ have
problem
mercy thing. It
and
seemed
Finland is
very,
first of all, we have way higher rates of mental
it
health
just didn't seem natural.
abuse, or mental health, substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety.
He's pandering.
We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have
Tubbs
such
agrees
a bad
with
gun
you.
violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence
I don't. I
epidemic,
thought that was
especially
nice.
that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn.
I would
He's
never
part
say
of a-
Christ have mercy,
but
but
it's the terrible
If he's
gun
if he's
violence
part of a
problem
liturgical
in a lot of
tradition,
our
that
big
would be like a
cities.
normal
And this is
prayer
what
that
we
you
have
would
to
say
empower law
in the
enforcement to
process of the
arrest the
service.
bad
Like it would,
guys.
it
put 'em
sounds weird
away,
to
and
Baptist
gun
ears,
offenders
maybe,
off
but
the streets. I think
if
there's
you're a
a whole host
Lutheran or
of
something,
things that we
that's
can
Dan's
do,
an atheist.
But I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more
even
security.
weirder.
Senator,
Even
thank you.
weirder.
Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it
I'm
only
an
later in your
agnostic.
political career
Oh, there you go,
did
there you go.
change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those San Diego parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun
Become
safety.
friends with school
I'm of an
shooters.
age where
That's what he said.
my shotgun
That's what
was
he
in my
said.
car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today.
J-Dub. I didn't even
And
realize J-Dub was
several
on here.
things I want to mention.
I don't
on
have
this.
any
Yeah.
guns.
Talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
cities and where it's at.
J-Dub said it the
Number one,
Texas way. Good Lord, have
the most
mercy.
Firearm
Good
deaths
Lord.
happen in Minnesota
Good
are real
Lord.
suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one,
things?
and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora.
By the way, did
Well,
we
you
get this
agree
on
with
the
that last
Now to the
sentence.
top contributor
bingo,
to
buddy?
inflation,
Walt
the
references
high cost
classroom.
of
Doesn't it give us
housing
another
and
square
rent.
there?
There's a
Yep.
shortage
Well, we
of more
already
than
had
4
that
million
one.
homes in the United
Oh,
States.
well, good to catch
and
up.
that
Thank you.
contributes to the high housing crisis. Governor Walz, the
Spoons
Harris
made
campaign
me
promises a $25,000
I
down
blame the
payment assistance for
spoons.
first-time home buyers
Just
and
too
a
convenient.
$10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes?
Yeah,
and
she's on crack,
handing out that kind of
and she
money
wants to
just drive
tax
up
your
prices
unrealized
higher?
gains.
No, it's not handing out.
Which would include your
let me say
house.
This issue of housing, and I think those of
nuts.
you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up. It can be
They
shifted.
want to
It
tax
can be moved
your
around.
house's
Those are not
unrealized
folks
gains.
living in those houses.
Yes,
Those of
they
you
want
listening
to.
tonight,
Well,
the
they
house
want to
is a big
tax
deal. I bought
unrealized
and owned
gains.
one house
Was
in
her
my life.
position.
My mom
All right,
still lives in the house where I
I'm
was.
Trump.
And when I
I
think
guess
of a
I'm
house,
voting Trump now.
I'm
Yep.
thinking of Christmas
I know,
services
that's-
after midnight mass where you go with
everybody-
your family. We need to
Everybody
make it
that knows
more
anything when
affordable.
they heard
And
that
one
are
of the
like,
things, as I
"Oh,
said,
you shouldn't be
this
around the
program that the
president."
Dude,
vice
if she's
president
from
is
California,
pushing
she's trying to tax
forward
unrealized
and
gains.
bringing a new
Yeah.
way of
My
approaching
parents
it.
would have to pay
That's something
millions
we're
in
doing
taxes.
Minnesota from that
Well,
lead.
I won't.
We in the state invested
the
in
government
making
will
sure our
collapse.
housing was the
All my
biggest investment.
now,
that
all
we'd
my
ever made in
Democrat
housing.
friends tell me,
It starts
"Oh,
to
don't
make it
worry, she'll
easier.
never,
We cut
she'll
some
never
of the
get that
red
through."
tape. Local
You
folks,
know,
look, we
I'm
can't
like,
do it
well,
at the federal
maybe
level,
not,
but
but
local folks make it easier
That's
to
what they
build
said
a
about
home.
prohibition.
And then that down payment
That's
assistance.
what they said about Roe versus Wade.
that's what they said about Roe versus Wade. Exactly.
Certainly for
They'll
me,
never do that.
using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's
You would need
home
to
loan,
swing the
thing
entire
about a veteran's home
Supreme
loan is
Court. That's not going
you
to
don't
happen for
have to pay the down
generations.
payment.
Yeah, happen in
Those
4
are things
years.
that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in.
Man,
But we
it just
can't
wasn't
blame,
that long ago that we just
immigrants
had
for the only reason. That's not the
2008.
case that's happening in many cities. The
Home
fact of the
ownership is
matter
not the
is that we don't have enough naturally
magic pill
affordable
to
housing.
anyway,
But
whatever.
we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and
Seize
cut
federal
back
lands.
on
You don't have to do
immigration,
that.
which you say
You already
pushes
have
up
them.
prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens
Pass the bill.
competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened.
He's saying that we have
alongside
massive increases
massive
because of
increases
illegal
in
immigrants?
alien
Because we have
populations
more people
under Kamala
requiring
Harris's
housing,
leadership.
so
Now, Tim
demand
just
goes
mentioned
up.
a bunch of ideas. Now,
But-
some of those
Yeah, but you
ideas
got to
I
have the
think
money
are
going
in
up
the
with
good.
it.
areas we're
Some of
talking
them I
about.
disagree with, but the most important thing here is
California
Kamala
prices have
Harris
not gone
is
up like they have
running
because of illegal
newcomer
immigrants.
politics. She is
No,
the
other
sitting
places,
vice
though,
president. If she
right? Look,
wants to
these
enact
areas that
all
have,
of these
like,
policies to
a
make
third of
housing
their
more
population
affordable,
is now
I invite her
legal
to
immigrants.
use the
Brownsville,
office that
Texas?
the American people already gave
Some
her,
of the towns that
not
have
sit
this
around and
have,
campaign and
the
do
immigrants
nothing
that come
while
in
Americans
under
find
asylum
the American
protection
dream
or
of home ownership
these
completely
programs,
unaffordable.
they'll
Now, you
have
asked,
rental
Margaret, what would
assistance, which then
immediately
boosts the rental
change
price
the
for everybody
equation for
else.
American
Because
citizens
now you've got,
if you
instead of
lower energy
the
prices, as
natural
Donald
price
Trump
of
says,
the
drill,
number
baby,
of
drill.
apartments
One of
available
the biggest
now,
drivers of housing
you have
costs,
twice,
aside
you know,
from
a
illegal
third as
immigration,
many or
is think
more
about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer
Can I have it?
where you Governor, we'll get to you in a moment, but Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used.
I
We
haven't
have a
heard
lot
of any
Americans that need homes.
federal
We should be
lands that
kicking
are
out illegal
constricting the
immigrants who are
ability
paying
of
for those homes, and we should be building more
suburban
homes for the
areas to
American
grow.
citizens
But
who
maybe
deserve to be here.
I'm
Senator, your
uninformed.
time is
I
up.
have never heard
Governor,
that either.
I do want to let you respond
I
to
don't
the
think that makes any
allegation
sense.
the
Let's
Vice
build some
President
houses in
is
Big Bend.
letting in
Yeah.
Well, of course, that's not
migrants.
true. And
Tiny
again,
house
I have the facts.
neighborhood
I guess
right
not
there
the
on the
fact
side.
check.
It'd
I'll
be
check
pretty.
it. Look,
Yeah.
prices are down
Scenic.
compared to when Donald Trump was in
Yellowstone,
office. But
exactly.
it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
People who federal
Yeah.
lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal
Weird.
lands. I know in the western part of the country
weird.
we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example.
Exactly.
So the issue is that I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a
Send some
reason.
down
They
to
belong
Texas. We just
all of
ran
us.
out, apparently.
But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it's
J-Dub.
immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
I know.
Governor, your time is.
I was just
your
liking
time
some of
is
this
up,
stuff.
But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that
There's
we're happy to
Dan's
share after the
question.
debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased
Did you sell
levels
drill?
of
Did
migration,
you say drill?
especially
He said
illegal
drill.
immigration and high
Drill,
housing
baby,
prices.
drill.
Of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing
I
prices.
don't have that
It's
on my
also
card anywhere.
The regulatory regime of Kamala Harris.
No. You were
We are
asking
a country of builders. We're a country of
about
doers. We're a
illegal
country of
immigrants
explorers.
raising
Yes,
housing
We
prices.
increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Waltz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity.
Let's not throw the
The
builders
thing
in
that is
jail.
most
Let's
turned
throw the
housing into a
immigrants in jail.
commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as
Governor.
a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis. I
He's
can tell.
He's
But
not
Nora,
incorrect from a theory
One of the top
standpoint, but
problems
actually it's
facing
HUD
Americans is the
that
high
creates those
cost
rules,
of
which is
healthcare.
an executive
Senator Vance,
cabinet
At the
level.
last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, I have concepts of a plan. You've talked about changing how chronically
means
ill Americans
no
get
plan.
health insurance.
Yeah, it means
Can you
exactly. It
explain
means I have no
how
clue
that
what I
would
want to do.
work?
No plan.
And can you guarantee
It's
that
not
Americans
this.
with
It's not
pre-existing
this. Something
conditions
else.
won't pay more?
I have a beautiful
I'll give you
concept. It's
minutes.
beautiful.
Well, of course,
It's the best.
we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions.
Of
In fact,
course.
a lot of my family
Like,
members
that's
have
super
gotten
easy.
Healthcare. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have
I
criticized
love
this
our
concepts
audience.
of a plan remark.
Y'all are
It's
great,
very
man.
simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%.
Just not going to
Under
answer
Donald
that
Trump's
question, are you,
entire
buddy?
4 years, they
That's
were up
okay.
about 1.5%.
We know you don't got
We
an answer.
introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about,
Megyn Kelly's been
reinsurance regulations is
slamming
what I was
Kamala Harris for dodging questions. I guarantee you she doesn't give him any heat for dodging these.
Chronically ill, but the non-chronically ill.
So I think
it's not just a
the
plan.
substance of it
He
is what, that
actually
like,
implemented
hey,
some of
this
these
is going to be part of a
regulations when he was the
bipartisan
president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good
negotiation.
argument that it salvaged
So like,
Obamacare.
what do you want me to
doing
say about it? Like,
disastrously
we're
until
going to
Donald
put
Trump
it
came along.
together.
And I think this is an important point about President Trump.
Is
I don't have
is that
to agree
basically
with everything that
his
President
response?
Trump has ever said.
I think
or done.
it's basically
Obamacare
it is
was
weak.
crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs. Donald Trump could have destroyed the program.
But we got
Instead,
nothing, but they got
he
nothing
worked in
too.
a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online. The most common ones that'll be there. Look,
He's like, two can play at this game.
10 whole drugs.
You're going to saddle me with the Harris administration, then I'm going to take credit for everything we did.
Would have never given me that.
Yeah, smart.
What's good for the goose, man?
Just explained.
Very smart.
Smart.
Because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you will protect people with pre-existing conditions.
Difficult to argue with, man.
We currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place.
But no thanks to you guys is the point.
Marketplace function a little bit better.
Wait, to me?
Now, what Governor Walz just said is
you
directed that at
you.
A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do.
I don't understand what he's saying. How did Trump address that? All he did was eliminate the mandate.
Consequences are going to ensue. Yeah. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment
I don't know if failing to kill it is the same as working to save it, but whatever.
It's higher now.
We'll give you some credit there.
Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this, if young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do
it does work. It doesn't work well.
It's a good idea.
I mean, yeah. Well, the previous system also
the idea of making sure the risk pool
is
broad enough to
no one's going to be like, yeah, it was awesome. Let's go back.
It collapses. You are
but not by any metric of like
people out. Look,
people accessing the system. Like if you had pre-existing conditions, you were pretty much screwed or forced into a high risk pool.
And when
Sure.
we are able
Melissa
to
Gilson,
make it, we are making it.
Clint
this way.
Taylor.
When we
Yeah, but
incentivize people to be in the market,
that is the system
when we
working.
help people
It just
who
didn't
might
work
not be able to afford
as
it
well
get
as you'd
there,
like it to.
and we make sure then when you get sick
Oh,
at home,
okay.
it's there
Right,
for
but
you.
that's what I'm
Because
saying.
people
It's like,
say, well,
oh,
I
the
don't-
system
I don't
works
wanna
now.
buy
It's like,
into Medicare.
yeah, it
Well,
works.
good luck buying healthcare once
Kinda
you get
crappy,
past
but it
70.
works.
So look, the ACA works.
Wow.
We can continue
It's
to
just
do
not
better.
that's not
Kamala Harris did
impressive.
that. The way she made
It's
I mean,
everything
better than it
was
used to, dude.
negotiating those 10 drugs
I'm not an
that
advocate
the
for it,
First
but
Amendment
I mean,
American
it is better than it
Thank
used to
you.
be.
Margaret?
Yeah.
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of
Baby
subjects to
steps.
discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America.
We
There
got to
is a
sidestep
child
around
care
big pharma,
crisis
you know?
in this country. And the
Yeah, I
United
wish we
States
didn't.
is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave
Where they
program
allow
for new
people to wear
parents.
pink blazers
Governor
on
Walz,
television.
You said that if
Like
Democrats
fools.
win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you.
Shampoo will
How
play
long
you
should
for the
employers be
fool.
required to pay workers while they are home taking care of
Just
their
had to.
newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child.
This is like watching a commercial for the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, man.
This allows you to
Yeah.
stay
In
home a certain
Minnesota,
amount of
dude,
time.
I want to
What
move to
we know
Minnesota
is
after listening to
that
this.
gets the child off to a better start.
In
the
Minnesota,
family
we're
works better,
amazing.
We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth.
Minnesota.
That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue: those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest.
J-Dub, you need to cut
He's
this
willing to say,
interview, man, and
bust
make
those
a
unions
Family
up, do
Heritage
whatever.
promo video.
What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it
This is a
effort, the
really
supply
rambling
and the demand
answer.
side.
I don't feel
You
like
can't expect
this
the
is
most
working for
important
him.
people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support
Make
a
it easier to
national
have the
paid
children you
leave
want, but not the
program?
children you
And
don't
if
want.
So, for how
Those
long
can-
should employers be mandated to
I
pay
don't know
their
what to say.
employees while they are home taking care of their newborn?
They can be
You have 2 minutes.
discarded like
Yeah, well, first of all,
Making
Margaret,
it harder to have the children you
biological
don't want.
rubbish.
Democrats too have worked on this issue, and I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who's an incredible mother
Good for
of
you.
3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator, and I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy
That was 2
perspective.
words,
She actually had access to
extraordinarily.
paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model.
I got to
they
give
want.
Tubbs
A
her
lot of
due.
young
His
women would like
eyeliner
to
is
go
on
back to
point.
work immediately. Some would like to spend a
I
little
mean, he's
time
got the
home
whole
with the kids.
smoky
Some would
eye
like to
thing
spend
going.
longer home with
Mhm.
the
I
kids.
just want to
Some
follow
Smoldering.
those
want a
eyes.
family
Yeah.
care model
Smoldering.
that makes choice possible.
mesmerizing.
I think
His
this is a very
face is
important substantive
mesmerizing.
difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look,
Are
if
those
you look at the
eyes
federal
blue?
programs that we have that support paid family leave
They
right now,
are.
the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one.
You can scan that QR code and get a
Let's
fact
say you'd
check.
like your church maybe to
Should
help
do
you out
that.
with
See
childcare.
if
Maybe
it's
you
any
live in
good.
a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because look, it is unacceptable And, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator,
Heck of a
thank
lot
you.
better.
You have also said, Senator Vance,
It's like Brownie doing a heck of a job.
Heckin' good, man.
The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this.
We got a whole
President
fact check
Trump
website
recently
here.
Said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by
Good, that's your
penalizing
job.
companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave labor
Penalizing.
and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Spending that money, we haven't even brought it in yet.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child
We'll
care
eventually.
shortage?
Just hold on.
Well, because as Tim said,
Because we're throwing money at it. I mean, that's how we solve problems, right?
Multiple people.
Is there
who
another
could be
way?
providing
Is there
family
another
care
way?
options.
This is Washington,
And we're gonna
Dana.
have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce.
We're gonna have to spend more
people
money.
to want to provide
Gotta spend more money.
options for American
Gotta spend it.
families. Because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very
It's
essential
crazy,
service.
man. It used to be
Thank you, Senator.
Republicans
Governor
were like
Walz,
financial
your
restraint. Now it's
ticket
like,
also has
No.
some childcare
No.
It's like a
credit
competition to see who
proposals.
can spend more.
Do you think Congress will agree
crazy,
to the
man.
$6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress,
what are you going to do to avert a currency collapse? I mean, those are the questions we should be asking right now.
I mean, I'm sure they were shocked.
I'd love to hear that
It's
question
not that
asked.
expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarship types of things.
Yeah.
I think we need to be open to making.
Both these guys are
But the
super
issue
reasonable.
here is, the question you asked
Let's
is,
put them on a
we're not
ticket.
going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's
You know,
just adding another 4,000 on the family.
I think
and
these
taking
are
less.
both
So not
better
only do they
debaters.
not get the money to pay for that,
They're
but
master
they're
debaters.
$4,000 in the hole. That's worth
Master
that's
debaters.
his alma mater.
They're, I
And
think
so
they're
think the
this,
issue
to just
here is,
show a
if
higher
those
degree
members
of skill in
Congress,
this stuff.
I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the
We
state of
need to move on.
democracy, the top issue for
Nora?
Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020
Not true.
election, President
Ah,
Trump's
2020
campaign
election.
and others filed 62
Oh, we already
lawsuits
did that.
contesting
We already did
the
that.
results.
Yeah, wedding gift.
Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for
Oh
January
my gosh, there was an
6th.
attempted
Senator
coup
Vance, you have said
against
you
the
would
person
not
who got
have certified the
81
last
million
presidential
votes.
election and would have
It's
asked the states to submit
disgraceful.
alternative electors. That has been
One of these
called
days, we're going to get you to admit there was a
unconstitutional
fake
and
elector
illegal.
scheme, dude.
Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation
Nobody
crisis.
wants to
Dig into
talk
the
about
question.
that.
Policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable. And
As one of the most
that's what we're focused on.
embarrassing
But I wanna answer your question
moments
because
from
you
my
did ask it.
past,
Look, what President Trump
we'll
has
talk
said
about something
is
else
that
instead.
there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and
I'm not
that's
gonna answer
all
your
I've
question.
said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he
That is
said
not
on
all that
January
Donald
6th,
Trump
the
has said.
protesters ought to
No.
He said a
protest
lot.
peacefully.
This is the worst skipping of
What
a
happened?
question
Joe Biden
that I've
became
seen
the
him do.
president. Donald
He said
Trump
many
left the White
things
House, and now, of course,
about this.
unfortunately,
That's
I
not
take
all
back
he
everything
said.
I said.
Yeah.
policies that have come
That's
from
all
the
he
Harris
said.
Biden
That's all he.
administration.
That's all he
I
said.
believe that we actually do
said.
have a threat to democracy in this
Guys,
country,
that's
but
all he said.
unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of
Wow,
censorship.
that was just a
It's
horrible
Americans
skipping of that
casting
question.
aside lifelong
Yep.
friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow
Look at
citizens.
Tim, dude. He's
And it's
loaded for
Kamala
bear.
Harris saying,
Oh, he's
rather
ready.
than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to
I'm
censor
really glad
people
you
who
asked that
engage in
question.
misinformation.
Oh.
I think that is
It's
a
almost
much
like
bigger threat to democracy than
I
anything that we've
suggested
seen in this
through
country
my back
in the
channel.
last
We're
that
talking
it
about the
be
in the
future.
last 40 years.
Where we
Now,
should
I'm
be
really
focusing.
proud,
Shouldn't be
especially
focusing on
given
your
I was
question. We
raised
should
by
be
two
focusing on the
lifelong
future.
blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it
Surprised
during
censorship
COVID.
isn't on
She's
this
done it over a number
bingo
of
card
other
here
issues.
either.
Yeah.
That to me is a
I
much
think
bigger
that's a
threat to
pretty big
democracy
issue, to be
than
honest.
what Donald Trump
Huge.
said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Oh, well, you did bring it back
Well,
to
I've enjoyed
January
tonight's
6th
debate.
there.
I think there was a lot of commonality here, and
At the
I'm
end.
sympathetic to misspeaking
Very
on
end.
things, and I think I might have with the senator. But
Me
there's,
too, man.
there's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election.
He's so gentle, man, in his reprimand. You know, it is really masterful.
That day, some with the American flag, several later died, and it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state
Well, you can
capitol
tell
grounds
that
in St. Paul.
he's won
and said,
several
"We're marching
different
to the governor's
elections,
residence,
different
and there may be
types of
casualties."
elections.
The only person there was my
Right,
son
like
and his
there's a
dog, who
kind
was
of
rushed out crying
It's
by
very
state
nice.
police.
Nice work.
That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Nice response.
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th.
Finally, bro.
For 250 years in this country. We are
Didn't even show up to the ceremonies. I mean, come on.
I hope that we'll win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president,
rewriting
he'll have
history.
my prayers, he'll have my best
Seriously,
wishes, he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Yes, but they didn't send slates of fake electors. They didn't threaten to hang the vice president. I mean, it's just totally different.
They didn't.
Dude,
He didn't.
Eric, he knows that. This is just the puppet
Yeah,
show.
I know.
We need to respect the results of the election. I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think of revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions.
Exactly. Just
this idea that there's
own it.
censorship to stop people from doing
Got way out of hand.
threatening to kill
I was
someone,
not behind
threatening to do
it.
something. That's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight,
preventing someone from posting on social media is totally different from
I
banning
think this
a
is
book.
the conversation they want to hear.
Not letting someone access
this
payment
is one
system.
that we are miles apart on.
I mean, just use cash.
This was a threat to
legal
our
tender.
democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris...
Dude, if he won't answer that one, he can't answer it, though.
2020 COVID
MAGA would throw him under the bus.
He can't answer it.
Yeah, he can't.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were
Come on,
problems
bro.
in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further.
Did he win?
You guys attack
Answer the
us
question.
for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's
You
the Supreme
actually can.
Fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
I agree with that, and it's not what is up for discussion at the moment.
I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see
tried to,
a
though.
candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is where is the firewall?
No, he wouldn't have been on that stage anyway, though.
Where is the firewall? If
Wow.
he knows
Trump was done. Trump was done with him right after he wrapped up the evangelical vote.
and his vice president
The only people that were a fan of Pence was the fly that kept landing on his face.
Will you keep your oath of office? Even
No, he needed him for evangelicals, man.
Kamala Harris would agree.
Yeah, I guess.
He doesn't anymore, though. Now evangelicals think he's sent from God.
So America, I think
I'm on a
you
mission
have
from
really
God.
Clear choice on this election.
The
of
chosen.
Who's going to honor that
Going to restore
democracy and who's gonna honor Donald Trump.
Christian values to America.
The Lord's anointed.
We will be
Yeesh.
right back with both of our candidates, the CBS News vice presidential debate.
Okay.
I'm still shocked he picked JD. Like JD just doesn't, a 40-year-old, guy who was totally against him for the longest time. Forgetting all the other stuff. I mean, I don't know who did his vetting and who said you should go with this guy, but I don't know how he picked JD Vance.
I have to think. I think it was a good choice. So the problem right now for the people that are on the sort of MAGA side of the Republican Party is that there's no deep bench to work with. You've got Trump, and that's it, right? You've got some of the wacko MAGA people like Carrie Lake over in Arizona, or when you see like the Florida man holding up the flag in the hurricane says Trump 2024, like you've got those kind of people, but you don't have someone that could be the standard bearer for that wing of the Republican Party. And so I think if you don't have someone like that is young, that is pro-labor, that has this kind of flexibility, then what's likely to happen is once Trump is gone, even if he has the next 4 years, you have plenty of people within the Republican establishment, the establishment wing, that would just say, well, let's wait out the 4 years, that's that, and then we can go back to the gravy train the way it used to be. And so I think it's very crucial that he finds someone that is young and flexible and already has a high office as a senator. So I think the other potential choices would have been more interesting, like if he had picked someone like Tulsi Gabbard to cement the anti-war crowd. But then you wind up with a unity ticket, and that doesn't give you a way to establish your ideas inside the party. It becomes kind of a one-off cool thing. But that's it. Same thing as if like he had somehow managed to convince RFK Jr. to be his running mate, which would have never happened. But someone like that. So I think the other option would have been to try to find an establishment person, like another Pence. But then, why would you do that? Like, the Republican establishment is kind of gone. Like, they've all become Democrats, or many of them have. So, I don't know. I think if not him, who are you going to pick? It's going to be someone like him. If not him personally.
I think if I was Trump, I would have gone for somebody, probably a female, probably a little bit older and more established, and somebody that just had a little bit more respect and could bring him. So like he brought in. There's no question he brought in. What's his name? I don't know why I just forgot his VP's name.
Vance?
No, originally.
Oh,
Mike Pence.
Pence. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
He brought in Pence to be able to gather a certain, like the evangelical vote, but, he needs somebody that's going to be able to get him, what he's lacking right now. I think Kamala did a great job. She picked somebody who's going to really help her grab a lot of the vote that she wouldn't have gotten otherwise. It's a good balanced ticket on her side.
I don't know that Walz brings anything. Like, Minnesota she's going to win Minnesota anyway. She doesn't need Minnesota. She doesn't need to solidify Minnesota. Like, are they hoping that, like, as a man, that they can get sort of the male vote? Because that clearly hasn't happened. Men are still trending real hard for Trump. Like, I don't think you look at him and think to yourself, wow, Walz, he's so manly. Oh my gosh, such alpha energy. I must vote for him. Like, I don't know. He's fine. I think he's good in the debate. I think I'm not saying he's doing a bad job. It's just I don't see that he brings anything magical to her campaign. Like, she's already the novelty. Would be the first female president. So,
but that's the thing. I think
maybe find someone kind of boring like this.
Well, no, but I'm saying I think he grounds it out. I mean, what have we had for the bulk of our history? Is we've had older white guys, right?
Sure.
And he's an older white guy that's respectable, that speaks well, that kind of toes the line very, very well. So I think that's where that balance comes in.
You guys want to hear these closing statements?
Yeah, let's hear
do it.
Folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between them.
Can't believe he just advertised the Dick Cheney endorsement.
Dick Cheney.
Truly optimistic people.
It's not an endorsement I'd be wheeling out.
Future of this country, and one where our politics can
Look,
be
the Dark Lord of the Sith, and
someone that I just announced as a war criminal.
Than it is,
we're proud to
is
have
the
his
sense
endorsement.
Of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage. And then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity.
Movement of what?
Everybody gets a chance to
bowel
thrive.
movement.
I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Both of these tickets
Well,
are just
Governor
awful.
Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have
Low
enough
energy
money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with Kamala.
Your dog shouldn't have to worry about getting eaten.
Now, I've been in politics long enough to do
dogs.
what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing.
You hear that? Afford.
What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you.
Rooting for you.
Thank you both for participating in the
Rootin'
only
tootin'.
vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Okay.
All right, there we go.
Okay, gents.
Hey,
Nobody.
Not only do they shake hands, they're hanging out at the end.
Yeah, I see that. They're still kibitzing.
Yeah,
dude, Trump was gone.
Look at that.
Trump and
got some hugs. See if the wives meet each other.
We're going to introduce our wives to each other.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah,
that's
nice. That's harkening back to a softer time in politics.
It reminds me back when presidents used to concede the election and then show up for the inauguration of the next guy. That was nice.
No, I'll tell you though, that was, I think even though they had a lot of differences that they talked about, that there was a lot less of a hard edge to the debate. Like there wasn't as much like this person is horrible, you're nasty, like both people, you're Hitler, whatever. And instead it was like, well, I actually really agree with him about this. I mean, I think we disagree about how we would implement it, but I really like that idea. Like that, there was a lot of that. And I know some of that is just kind of showmanship, some pageantry.
It's very welcome showmanship.
It's good
in this corner anyway.
I agree. Very welcome.
So it's like, yeah, please more of that. Even if we can say, okay, we're not talking about two completely different competing views of what America should be, but instead more like, I like this path forward rather than that path forward, but we're still going in the same direction ish, somewhat.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of not that it's the most important thing or even in the top 10, but I mean this idea of like pageantry and form and institutions that handshake one to another is not some meaningless thing. It's not, oh, well, who cares if he wasn't there? It's like, he wouldn't have been welcome anyway. He probably wouldn't have been. And that's not the point. I mean, like if George W. Bush can show up to Inauguration Day after Obama cleaned the floor with him, totally trashed the administration, was talking down W, the entire time. And he's still not even nice about it. W still showed up and did the job. That's part of the job, is handing over reins to the next guy.
Oh, W
So-
called him. So according to President Obama, W called him the night that he won, congratulated him, told him like, this is going to be this amazing journey for you, and all this other, like just like super cheerful about it. you know?
Right.
But and I think in exchange, what was really nice is that Barack Obama continued pretty much every single one of George W. Bush's policies.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a
so,
fan of that, but whatever.
well, I mean, maybe that's so. Here's kind of the sort of wink and the nod here. That maybe the reason why we've had such clean changes of government is because the government didn't actually change. So it's like, oh yeah, you can take over now. It's fine.
Well, so
Same
I was
stuff happens.
I was talking with a friend of mine. I want to say a few days ago, but I think it was a few weeks ago now, and we were talking about this exact thing, right? So, look, you're a smart guy, Dan. You're a smart guy. We're all smart people, right? You're informed. You pay attention. It is not possible to have these like multi-year, multilateral agreements between nations, let's say, right? Treaty, different things like this, where you're trying to like, especially like when we're the head of the current world order, basically, for better or worse, right?
Right.
Without some kind of underlying continuity. This whole idea of like, the deep state, these bureaucrats, the uniparty, whatever. Yes, that is present. I'm not apologizing for it or saying that they're doing everything right or anything like that. However, a real serious conversation needs to be had about like, look, these are the agreements that are in place. These are the way these pieces interlock together. And if you remove one of them, like, for example, we're going to shut down NATO now because we're not going to like fund it anymore. Let's just say, right. That the entire system collapses because of that. And here are the repercussions of that, right? Like those kind of things aren't being discussed or put out there. It's just like, oh, this guy's a threat to the system, or, oh, we have to vote for these people, even though they have no stated opinion about anything except we're not him. And so, but we got to do that because that saves the world. It's very like, I consider myself very fairly informed. I mean, I work hard to be, and even I'm not informed enough to know like, okay, what are the repercussions of that piece or this piece or the other thing. And so there's just a lack of, if you look back to like Kennedy's speeches, for example, like just go back, Kennedy, Nixon, any of these guys from the Eisenhower, any of these speeches, it's not just that they were more knowledgeable. They also treated their audience, the voters, with enough respect to say like, look, I mean, these are the issues that we're dealing with, and here's how I'm approaching them. And we don't get any of that anymore. I mean, at all. I think the decision has been made somewhere far away, in some room somewhere, that the American voter is just too dumb to understand this. It's almost like the election is like this inconvenient time every 4 years where like the voters may, I guess we got to listen to these people again. You know what I mean? And to just perpetuate the same set of, letting the adults run the show, so to speak.
But Eric, doesn't that speak to what Russell always talks about, right? Russell talks about the reason that he was a Trump voter, right? And changing it up completely, because I agree with you. But then we saw these massive changes when Trump came in, where he said, I'm not funding NATO. I'm pulling us out of the Iran nuclear contract. I'm taking us out of the Paris Climate Accords. I mean, how many things did he do that, like you said, probably underlyingly, president after president after president just kind of agreed that we're going to continue at least this baseline of items, right? But then suddenly it wasn't just one. It was like,
Well, exactly. And when you got guys like Vivek Ramaswamy, for example, like since he dropped out of the race, I've been following him just because he was one of the more, I think, intelligent people that was on stage. I didn't agree with half of what he said, but everything that he said was well thought. I mean, you could tell he had thought about it, and he's got a sophisticated enough brain. He wasn't just like regurgitating talking points. I mean, he was going down like, okay, but his point of view, which it's shocking to hear this, but like this is what's in Project 2025 and in a lot of this other stuff is that they literally want to get rid of he's 75% of all federal employees. Like he's literally like, look, I mean, my proposal would be, he's on record saying this, that if you have a odd number at the end of your social security number, you're out, right? And then we take the remaining people that have even ending social security numbers. And if your social security starts with an odd number, you're out. And so you're left with 25% of the people there. And, good luck. Put your institution back together again, however best you can. And then we'll decide where we want to go from there. Which from like a, like as a business owner, like, it's like, okay, there's some validity to that. You can see Elon doing that with Twitter. There's a bunch of different examples where that works out great. But this isn't a company. This is a government that's providing services to like millions of people. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's very, very unusual ideas. Let's put it that way.
Right. By the way, I think we may have lost John Wayne because he had put a comment earlier. I don't know if you saw. I was replying to it while we were on the call here, and he was trying to call out Kamala for talking about universal health care. My response to him was like, "Great, I'm totally 100% in support of it," and that was the last I heard of J-Dub.
I'm sure that didn't chase him off. If he'd been here, he would have been ready with some fire and brimstone.
With us, but I was surprised I didn't hear a word back.
I was having this conversation with one of my colleagues, and we were talking about like, well, do we really want government-funded healthcare and stuff? I was like, well, think about how much public money we spend on healthcare today. I mean, we have two systems. We have a public system. We have a private system. And the public system pays for some stuff. You have Medicare, Medicaid, county running certain hospitals, all sorts of stuff.
He's still here.
Yeah. And then you've got the private system on top of that with the insurance and everything else. So,
Russell, I'll share this with you. I've done a lot on this. I've actually been able to utilize the public healthcare system personally. I did a ton of traveling with bobsledding and everything else. And then, in my running, when I ran for Congress, I got a chance to dig deeper into it, and get a lot of this. And I'm going to just tell you what I told John earlier. And I really abide by this. First of all, we're utilizing it right now because my ex is responsible for Nevi's healthcare, and she uses it. And I was not a fan of the fact that she was utilizing it, but in using it, I've seen how it works, and it works better than any of the healthcare I've ever had for the other two kids or anything else.
You're talking about Medicaid or CHIPS or whatever? Mm-hmm.
Medicaid, because the idea of universal healthcare is basically Medicaid for all or Medicare for all, right? That's what it basically boils down to. And, John Stewart talks about this, and I think he really nails it well. When we pay our taxes, those taxes are supposed to go towards some basic things. Military is one, and we spend a ridiculous amount of our, tax income is spent on the military. But the things that we, agreed to as a nation, we have interstate highways. That's a socialist government. If you want to talk about this being socialist, we have our, our schooling. You get school is free for everybody all the way through 12th grade, and our healthcare should have a basic level of healthcare that's covered. And I know you want to jump in. I just want to finish this one thought. The biggest argument I ever got from people is like, well, I don't want to have to wait, or I don't want to have to do this, or I don't want to have to do that. And there's an answer to all that. But the biggest thing I can tell you is just like our education. If you think of our healthcare like our education system, if you want to have a higher level of education, go pay for a private school. You can absolutely do that. If you can go and do those things at any level. It doesn't have to be after they get out of elementary or out of high school and into college. You can get higher level of anything you want under that kind of a system. But at the very least, no family should ever worry about whether they can afford to take their kid in because they broke their leg, or whether or not they can get their basic medications if they've need insulin or anything else. And that is ridiculous to me that we don't at least have that basic coverage.
So Dan, I'm not disagreeing with you. What the point that I was making to my colleague who was worried about, like, well, how are we going to pay for universal health care? I know, I thought you'd like that kind of spicy meme there. But yeah, so talking about how we're going to afford all the health, this universal health care.
In bed.
And the point that I was making to them was that the amount of money that we currently spend, public money that we currently spend on healthcare per capita, is already above many first world countries that have universal healthcare. It's being, I don't want to say wasted, but it's just kind of dumped into this pile or this pile, this pile, and a lot of it overlaps, and it's harder to access, whatever. But we're already spending the amount that other countries spend on universal health care on a per capita basis. We just don't get the benefit.
Here's the thing, Russ.
We just don't get. So what I'm saying is, if we had universal health care, and we just diverted the money that we're currently spending on public health care and put it towards universal health care, there would actually be enough.
Yeah, he's agreeing with you.
Yeah, the reason we don't have universal health care right now is because the government is so inefficient in the way it's currently structured, and there's too many people that are profiting from
too many fingers in the pie, man.
Set up.
Yeah.
That there's no way to do it with the system we currently have. We would have to do something kind of Sanders-esque, where we just say, look, we're covering everybody. Here's the baseline of coverage, and if you want to buy more, you buy more, right? But we're doing this much. This is happening. So I agree with you. I mean, I think it's kind of ridiculous that we don't have something like this already. Given
it's crazy.
We're the only first world country that doesn't. And the answers that I've heard for why we can't, all of them seem to me to be kind of insane. Like one of them is like, well, look, if we're not spending, if your prescription drugs aren't $20,000 a month, then this other country would have to pay more for theirs, right? And it's like, yeah, what does that matter? Like, I'm not interested in subsidizing that other country's prescription drugs. I would like my prescription drugs to be subsidized. Like I'm not made of money over here.
Well, and I think that right there is. I'm so surprised that it blows me away how poor of a job both Trump and Vance do at actually making the best case that they have, which is two sides of the same coin. One side, which I've said before, is affordability, right? It is not inflation. It is not wages. It is not any of that. It is affordability. It's the fact that the money that I'm getting when I go to, the store, or when I go to buy a car, buy a house with X, Y, and Z, I cannot afford the things that I need to live. And I'm getting further and further behind on my bills. Like that is where all these metrics, stock market, blah, blah, all that is not like, that is it. Affordability. Because you feel that every time you fill up your tank, every time you go get groceries, et cetera. And the other thing is, on the flip side, is this immigration thing, which, Russell sent me this thing here, Dan, but these are part of the numbers that were released. So you can see this, but like the average person that I talk to, and that as you go around the internet, you watch these things, right? The fact that America is able to give billions and billions of dollars to Israel, which needs it, Ukraine, which needs it, for all these illegal immigrants, we got to put them up in, hotels, apartments, whatever the case may be. And yet we cannot do the same thing for our own citizens is just crazy. The average person that is like, well, wait a minute. So you're telling me you can't afford to fix my school. You can't afford to get me, fix the potholes in my street. You can't afford to fix the public transportation. You can't afford to do any of this, but you can afford to shovel out another $150 billion to Ukraine when Zelensky comes. And again, I'm not arguing for or against any of that. I'm just saying,
totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is unbelievable to me how they don't make this case in a more cogent way and instead make it about eating pets and all this other nonsense that they're talking about. And then meanwhile, the other side isn't even ignoring. They're just completely ignoring it. Like it's not a thing. I don't know.
Well, it's because when you're running, and again, I can say this from the perspective of somebody who's run. It's because when you're running, the people that are consulting you are telling you these are the. What's that?
Oh, J-Dub's saying out. So.
Oh, good night. But the guys that are running, or the guys that are consulting you when you're running, are telling you these are the talking points that people right now care about, and it's constant polling. So they're, it's like, hey, what resonated? Taylor Swift resonated. Nigerians eating or Haitians eating cats and dogs, that resonates. And those are the things that
please keep your shithole countries separated there. Yeah.
So and the interesting thing is when you got somebody like Trump, he is constantly putting fodder out there. It's almost like when you go to court, one of the ways to win in court is to completely blizzard somebody with paperwork, right? Like, okay, it doesn't matter what your facts are, my facts are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you for a million things and make you send us all this stuff, and I'm going to send you all these documents and that is a tactic that is commonly used, and it's the same thing in politics. It's JD Vance saying, why did simple question, do you think that Trump won? And his answer being, well, let's talk about really what the future holds and this is an important thing that we need to be discussing. It's like, and it's not even, look at the hand and don't see what this other hand is doing. It's saying, hey, just
look at the bird.
that.
Look at the bird.
Yeah, look at the bird. But here, I'm gonna actually wrap this up too, just because I've got this beautiful man that just showed up here.
Yeah, dude, look at that.
I haven't had a chance to properly say hi to, but I would love. I want to throw this out to the Hamadis. I would love if you guys are down for it to have a discussion that is 100% all around the healthcare issue, or even the politics and this issue of like, I think you could make an entire segment out of this that would be incredibly interesting.
Let's do it. I'm down for that.
By the way, did you guys do the Dalio book yet? Are we doing book club?
So I have it. I haven't started reading it yet, but it's sitting on my shelf, like all my other books that I haven't read.
Well, just give me a date so
that
we can figure it out. I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, so I thought it was coming up sooner than that.
Okay, I'll get on it. Sorry about that.
All right, guys. Hey, thanks for being on. Thank you guys for watching. This was terrific. Again, I don't think we have another presidential debate. I think both of these clowns are not going to fool with each other. So,
yep. We just get memes on Twitter after this, or X. Sorry.
Yeah, X, exactly. I wonder if it would make any sense to live stream one of these town halls or not, with just one of them on there. But I'm sure there's plenty of fodder. This one was pretty tame, I thought. It was
but it was good. It was
good.
It was actually enjoyable to follow it. It was a lot more enjoyable than most of them, and that's not that bar has ever been set that high.
Yeah, right. All right, y'all. See you next time.
Peace.
See ya.